Hi guys, welcome back to Flower Class with Helen and Olivia. My name is Madison and I'm going to be teaching today's workshop, which is one of my all-time favorites. We are going to focus on Ranunculus today, which is definitely top up there on my list of favorite flowers. So we have tons and tons of beautiful product in class today. Some really beautiful statement pieces, some things that will likely be new to you. So we're working with some really interesting butterfly ranunculus, which is a new kind of variant on our traditional ranunculus. We have some Hanoi ranunculus, so all kinds of beautiful Dutch imports, and we're going to make something really spectacular and quite beautiful. We're working in a different size vase today. So this is a 4x6x6, just speaking to the dimensions of the vase. Typically the size of your vase will dictate how much floral is actually needed in order to make a complete arrangement, and also kind of dictates the overall pricing of the arrangement. We haven't used this vase in class yet, so if you have taken a bunch of classes thus far, this is going to be a new, interesting, kind of unique twist on what we're ordinarily doing. The layout's going to be a little bit different. I'll speak to the shape and kind of scale of the arrangement itself. So if you feel a little bit uncomfortable working in this particular vase, that's totally normal, and I'm going to kind of walk you guys through how to work in something in this shape and size. All right, so we're going to begin. Actually, I'll speak to the tools that I'm using in class today. Typically, I will use, when demonstrating, one of two different tools, clippers and a knife. And I'm usually just doing that just for demonstration purposes, so you guys can kind of see what it looks like to use both types of tools. However, I would definitely recommend having a knife handy for class today. You can definitely get away with not having one, but there are some pretty crazy thorns on some of these varieties of roses, and I find a knife to be particularly helpful in removing those thorns. So I'm using just a Swiss Army knife, although you can use just a sharp kitchen knife, just as long as it has a straight edge rather than a serrated edge. And then if you have clippers handy, you can also use a pair of clippers as well. So you can either use both, just a knife. You can certainly get away with just using clippers, although I do think it's a little bit more difficult to remove the thorns with clippers alone. Okay, so we are going to begin by lining our vase. We're going to use a tea leaf to do this. This is going to kind of conceal the mechanics of the arrangement. It's going to keep everything looking very clean and presentable. So this is a technique that we use all the time in the shop, especially in an instance where we want the customer to be able to focus on the floral itself. And we have some really spectacular stuff. So taking the kind of focus off the vase, we're going to keep it really clean and simple. We'll start by taking our tea leaves out of the bucket. We have 2 leaves today, although what I suspect is that you'll probably only need to use one of them. These leaves are so substantial that you can probably get away with just one. This is how big my leaf is. If your leaf is smaller, there is an opportunity to use both leaves, but we'll just start with one and kind of see what coverage we have. So I'm going to begin with clippers or scissors, whatever you guys have, removing the length of the stem plus about 3 to 4 inches of the actual leaf itself. So right about here, I'm just going to clip this entire segment off. So what you'll see is you just have this really beautiful flat leaf. There's a shiny side and there's a more matte side on the back. On the back, you'll see that there's also this really thick spine kind of running through the back of the leaf itself. It's helping to keep the leaf upright on the plant, but we actually want to break that stem down so that we can manipulate and get into the vase. So the way that we're going to do that is I'm going to take the spine side and I'm going to rub the spine along the edge of whatever surface you're working on. So I'm just working on a table, but you could do this on your kitchen island, wherever you're working. I'm just kind of like sliding that edge, sliding that spine along the edge, breaking up the fibers in there that are keeping it really rigid. Okay, so just a couple passes over the edge of your whatever surface you're working on is going to make the leaf a lot more flexible. So now I'm going to take, I'm holding on to my cut edge here, and I'm just going to kind of wrap it into a burrito shape. Be careful. The stem is still there, so there's this chance that it can kind of like break out through the leaf itself. So I just try to be pretty careful, just rolling it into like a sushi or burrito shape. And then I'm going to then slide it into my vase. And I'll usually kind of shake the outsides like this just to kind of open it up a bit so that when it goes into the vase, it kind of like expands to fill. All right, so now we have a ton of excess that's resting above the lip of our vase. So I'm going to either use clippers or scissors, and I'm just going to cut this away. So you don't need to be super, super fancy with this. If it's a little bit jagged, that's totally fine. This is going to get covered up by our actual floral, but I just want to make sure that I'm removing it now so that I'm not preventing stems from getting into the vase later on. So I'm just snipping away anything that is above the top of the vase. All right, and you can see mine is not a clean cut across. Like you could certainly go and try to get a clean cut, but this is going to be covered, so I wouldn't really focus on that at all. So you can see that my entire vase is already covered just with one leaf itself. If you happen to have a smaller leaf, or maybe your leaf was like irregularly shaped, you may want to put another leaf inside of that leaf in order to fill things out. But if you have pretty decent coverage like I do, where you're not seeing much exposed vase, then I would go ahead and just work with one of the leaves, because we do have so much product to get in. It would end up kind of taking some space away from the rest of our floral. So now we have one piece of this wire. So we gave you guys a pretty big piece of this. I'm actually going to recommend that we cut this in half, because if we put all of this in, and I'm just using my clippers, not best technique for floral design purposes, but it does the trick. And I try not to cut wire too often with my clippers. But if I put that entire piece in there, I would end up forcing stems, and we're working with some delicate things. So I just don't want to overstuff or overcrowd this vase with wire itself. So we are going to use this chicken wire to create some structure inside of our vase. It's going to create some support for our actual stems, and it's going to keep everything upright and in place so that as we add more stems, you're not having a lot of shifting and movement inside of our vase. So that can be really frustrating as you're trying to design, where the more that you add in, things are kind of like falling over or flopping or getting stuck on one side. This is going to prevent that entirely. So an excellent tool, and definitely would recommend sticking this under your kitchen sink or something, and just the extra bit to use in the future. You can use this in any size vase. So definitely hold on to this. It's a great thing to have if you pick up flowers from the grocery store or something. All right, so I'm holding my section of chicken wire. I'm just going to fold it in half, and then I'm going to fold that in half again. So I'm just creating like a little dome shape that I'm then going to slide into my vase. All right, so I just slid it in, and I don't really have any wire that's hanging over, but if you have wire that's like sitting up here, just go ahead and push it down with your hand. We just don't want to see any of that. But if you look at it from above, you'll see that what you've now created with this wire is lots of little nooks and crannies that we can then go ahead and add our flower stems. So an excellent tool, highly recommend it. Cuts down on a lot of waste, and also you can repurpose this. So definitely use your extra bit of chicken wire, and you can also take this chicken wire out of the arrangement once it's kind of gone through its life, and then reuse that chicken wire again. So now that we have our vase kind of prepped and ready for actual design, we're going to go ahead and approach our bucket and see what we've got here in class today. So tons of really spectacular stuff. We're going to start by laying a bed of white hydrangea, which is going to be kind of like the landscape, and then we're going to add our ranunculus, and other greens on top of that. So we'll begin by pulling out our 3 white hydrangea. So these are full-size hydrangea. We left the little baggies on them for protection purposes. So the first step is that we are going to remove this little protective sheath here. I like to go pull down on the bag so that you don't worry about breaking anything up top. So hydrangea, just some quick tips. This tends to be a favorite flower because it's available year-round. Tends to be available at lots of different locations. So you can get it from the grocery store. You could get it from a florist. A lot of you guys will grow it in your garden. So people tend to be familiar with hydrangea, and when they are familiar, they tend to have some similar complaints. So one of which is that it gets floppy quickly, which can be an indication of a few different things. Either you're buying older products, so grocery store hydrangea has gone through a lot of different steps in order to get to the actual grocery store, so it tends to be a lot older and have been cut from the farms a lot earlier on. So the stuff we're using tonight is really fresh, and you shouldn't have any trouble with it wilting from actual age of the product itself. The other thing that it can wilt from is dehydration. So hydrangea are by far the thirstiest flower in all of the flower kingdom. They need constant hydration. So a lot of the times if your stem has gotten soft, you'll notice this kind of just starts to wilt over. You can reclip the bottom of your stem and put it back in water. And typically in about 30 minutes, it will have bounced back. If that doesn't work, you can go ahead and submerge the head of the water in some lukewarm water as well. So whether it be a bowl or filling up your kitchen sink, submerge the face of the flower as well. That's going to help it quickly rehydrate too. So yeah, those are just some quick tips for hydrangea to keep them really nice and healthy. So we will begin by taking a look at our hydrangea flower itself. Because they require so much moisture, they're often kind of moist on the face of the flower as well. So when they're packaged in those baggies and then put into boxes, they can have small pieces of rot on them. So we're going to begin by just taking a look at the face of your flower. If you have any petals that have browned, you'll just kind of pluck them off. So begin by just removing anything that is discolored. And when you pull that away, it's not going to hurt the flower at all. Actually, it's going to help it because you're just removing that rot. And if you remove it at the source, it will stop. So you're not going to notice that more brown spots start to form. Okay, so we're going to begin looking at our hydrangea, deciding how many leaves we want to leave on. I am going to leave on a few leaves around the face of the flower just to kind of frame it out. So that's usually 2 to 4 leaves. And then everything else, I'm going to go ahead and strip that away. So I'm going to just remove my leaves on all my stems right now. These guys, I'm just going to leave on because I only have 2 leaves. All right, so I'm going to, my first hydrangea, I'm going to hold it up against the side of my vase, kind of positioning it where I might like it to be. So for me, I kind of want it sitting over on this corner over here. And then I can use my clippers or whatever tool you're using to cut the stem where it looks like it's going to hit the bottom of the vase. So normally I'll just kind of hold it up like this, and that's a really good way as you're first beginning to design to get an eye for how long to keep your stems. All right, so I'm going to go in at quite an angle. So I'm going in about like so. My goal is that my hydrangea is going to kind of just rest on the side of my vase like that. And you'll see already like that grid is going to keep it in place. It's not kind of falling over the side of the vase. All right, so hydrangea number 2, I'm going to do on this flat edge. So I started putting one on a corner. This one I'm going to put on this flat edge opposite that over here. You can measure your stem up, give it a nice snip. And certainly if your stem is too long when you put it in the vase, you can definitely pull it out and cut it a little bit longer if you need to. All right, so I went first corner up here, then I did this short side over here, and then I'm going to spin my vase around, and I'm going to get my last hydrangea kind of sitting back here. So it's hard for demonstration purposes to kind of show you the measuring technique, but really it just involves kind of holding it up where you might like it to be. So I'm going to shoot for right around here, and then snipping your stem where it looks like it's going to hit the bottom of the vase. And generally speaking, I will kind of give it an extra inch of a snip because I tend to find the ends just a little bit too long when I use that method. All right, so there we go. So we're already with the nice thing about full-size hydrangea is that you're going to get a pretty large arrangement, a really lush full arrangement by using this as the basis. So these are really large blooms, which will ultimately result in a pretty large arrangement. So that's great. All right, so next up we are going to use our mini green. The nice thing about mini green, which is just a baby full-size hydrangea, they cut it early. It's this really pretty green color. So it looks a lot like your full-size hydrangea, just smaller and green. So wonderful for its color, but also because it helps to break up full-size hydrangea. So if I was to just kind of continue to fill this vase out with white hydrangea, what you'd notice is that all of a sudden I'd have this big fluffy cloud that would look like just one big mound of hydrangea rather than actual distinct flowers. The mini green is wonderful because it kind of blends in nicely with these full-size white hydrangea, but it's going to break it up and segment it so that all the flowers look like they're their own individual element. All right, so same as before, I'm just going to pull the baggies off, and then I'm going to remove all of my leaves except for maybe 2 to 4 that I'm going to leave on there. All right, so this is the front of my arrangement, or this is what I was first showing you guys, where I did my corner, flat side, and then stuck one on the back. So I'm going to first start by positioning one mini green between these 2 hydrangea so that they kind of have a separator so that they don't slide in and smush into one flower. So we'll begin by getting one hydrangea kind of in between them, and you can kind of work the leaves around and have the leaves kind of framing out the face of the flower nicely. I'm going to rotate my hydrangea and my arrangement, and I'm going to do another hydrangea here and here. And then my last hydrangea I'm going to get up top in my design. So some of your mini green hydrangea, you're going to notice that they have like more of a bend to them. So they kind of spill over versus some that may be more upright. So you can see this guy's kind of standing more tall rather than as bent over. I would say whatever is the straightest up for the top of your piece, and then these bendy ones to kind of fold over the side of your vase. So we are going to get one mini green in over here. Like so. Another mini green on this side. And then the last mini green is going to kind of fill in this open area up here. So at least in my piece, this may not be true for yours, but if I look at it from above, there's kind of this open area in the center here. So I'm going to put my last mini green kind of somewhere up top to fill in some of that hole. My only recommendation is to not stick that mini green kind of straight up and down in the center. Have it cocked off to one side, whatever side you prefer. So I'm holding my mini green up where I might like it to be. So I want it to be kind of around here, giving my stem a nice cut. And then I'm just going to kind of slide it in there. All right, awesome. So what we've done is built out a beautiful kind of lush basis. Oh my gosh, I realized that we do have one more mini green hydrangea. So this one will be a designer's choice. I think some great places that you could put it. You could, for instance, over here, I have this big, massive hydrangea that's kind of created a giant stripe of white on the back of my design, versus if I look at it from this angle, I'm getting a lot more green. So my choice is to kind of get my mini green inside of this white hydrangea to break it up a little bit. You may also decide that you want to put another one up top if your hole up top is massive. So this will be a kind of designer's choice. Either look for somewhere where this color is showing up less, or look for somewhere where you maybe have some exposed area. All right, so just by kind of popping in that one final mini green into this area here, I was able to break this up a little bit so that I don't have a massive kind of overwhelming space of white here. Okay, so now that we've got all our mini green in, we've created a nice, beautiful basis for our arrangement. We have 2 of these guys. I'm going to pop one of my umbrella fern in now. They're about the same size, but it doesn't matter which one you choose if you do have different sized ones. The other one I'm going to leave for the end, and then we'll kind of see how our arrangement kind of builds out, and then decide where we want to place that one. So it doesn't matter what side of your arrangement that this is going to go on, but I do want there to be kind of a beautiful asymmetric spray of this umbrella fern kind of coming out of the top of our design on one side. So I happen to have more open area over here, so I'm going to choose this side for that. So I'm not just going to lay it on top, because if I lay it on top, it's going to be kind of flat and laid out, sprawling across my flowers. I am going to kind of choke it up a little bit. So when I get it in, I'm going to kind of submerge it just a smidge inside the hydrangea so that it kind of all comes together and is more of like a beautiful spray out of the top. So I can clump my little fronds together and then kind of hold it up where I'm at like it's V. So you can see it's kind of extending beyond my mini green. You can decide how much of a statement you want it to be, but this is kind of where I feel like will look good. And then we can snip that stem, and then I'm going to go in up top here, and you can see I didn't do, let me rotate that for you. I didn't stick it in straight up and down in my arrangement. I definitely chose one side, and it's kind of spraying out of the top over here. All right, so I lied, and I think I do want to place at least half of the rest of my second piece of this umbrella fern in. So just purely for kind of describing to you guys how you can get some nice balance in your design. So I have a nice, lovely spray of this fern coming up over on this side. So in order to kind of balance it out and keep my eye from just focusing in on this really intense part of the arrangement, I'm going to counter that by kind of having some of the umbrella fern spray down in the front over here. So what I'm going to do is, you can see there's a logical kind of halfway mark between the fronds. So I'm going to break off half of it. So half of it will be left on the stem, and then this final piece we'll leave towards the end and see if there's anywhere else where we could use this. But I have a spray coming out over here, and then I want to balance my arrangement by having some of this kind of spraying out of the top front. So it's hard to do the measuring for this one, but I would say give yourself about 3 inches of stem. So I've got just a little bit of stem here, and I'm going to kind of lift my hydrangea up over here and pop in some of this fern coming out of the front of my design. Like so. You can kind of play with it a little bit, tweak it a bit if you want. But the goal is to kind of have something that's kind of pulling your eye down. And it's so hard for me to see look at it from this angle really quickly and get my placement right so that I can kind of show you guys what it would ideally look like. Okay, so I've got a spray kind of coming out up here, and then I have some kind of spraying out up front. All right, beautiful. Now we're going to go ahead and work with some of our roses and just leaving this little last bit for the end. I'm probably going to pop it in over on this side over here so that we have kind of some of this fern everywhere. But we are working with 2 different types of roses, and I'm just going to go ahead and pull them all out one time. So the first type of rose that we are working with is, let me see here, I want to make sure I get this naming right. This is called Queen's Crown. So I actually hadn't seen this variety before, but I think it's so pretty. And it's a beautiful soft peach, garden rose. So unlike other roses, it's going to have this beautiful cabbage-like center to it, lots of folded up leaves that are kind of all compressed into this beautiful shape. So we'll start, we have 3 of those guys. I'm just going to pull all 3 out. And then the other variety that we were working with is the creme de la creme, which is one of my favorites. It is this really beautiful buttery yellow, and you should have 6 of those. So go ahead and take all 6 out of the bucket as well. And we are going to clean them all up at the same time. So, we're going to begin with cleaning our roses up. There's just a few steps. I'm just going to move mine to the side so you guys can see what I'm doing. This particular variety, I've already forgotten the name, the Queen's Crown, has these really gnarly roses on it, or thorns on it. So just be really careful when you're handling them. And then also this is when your knife is really going to come in handy. So would be beneficial to pause the video and grab a knife if you don't already have one. So I'm going to begin by just picking off the leaves along the length of the stem. And then using my knife, you can kind of just take the edge of your knife and shave the thorns off. That helps them pop off really easily. The other option, if you don't have a knife, is to just take your clippers and just snip them off. Although I find it's a little awkward to do that, so I always like the knife technique. So I'm just removing my thorns and then any leaves that are on the stem. And luckily the creme de la creme do not have those thorns, so these guys will be a little bit easier to clean up. All right, step 2, once we've removed all of our leaves and thorns, is to remove the guard petals. So the guard petals on your rose, especially obvious on the creme de la creme because they tend to have this like green veining on them, but they are the petals that are on the outside of the rose. They are protecting the rose from different things like wind, rain, hands as it's being harvested. They're kind of like the shield for the rose, and they protect it when it's from its bud form until it's fully developed. So we leave them on up until the minute that we're going to put them into our arrangement, but right before we are going to just pluck those guard petals off. So obvious if they are discolored, so if they have more of a green coloring to them, they are more obvious. Also, if they are reflect, so they start to like roll over on themselves, those I would pop off as well. And then anything that's bruised or torn, you're also going to want to pop off. And I'm doing both of my varieties all at once. So go ahead and just clean up all 9 of your roses. If you have a rose that you've ended up kind of pulling away a ton of petals, you can gently kind of give the face of your flower a puff of warm air, and that's going to help accelerate it opening up a little bit so that the shape looks a little bit better. Okay, so once we have cleaned our roses, we are going to go ahead and kind of place them into piles. I want both of these colors to be introduced on kind of all sides of our design. So I'm going to be a little bit strategic when I'm deciding what to cluster together and where to place things. So I'm going to begin by laying my roses out into a few different groupings. So my first grouping, I'm going to have 2 yellows and a peach. Second grouping, 2 yellows and a peach. And then my third grouping, I'm going to have same thing, 2 yellows and a peach. So my goal is here that I've grouped them out into 3 because that tends to be very pleasing to the eye. So generally speaking, things grow in groupings of 3 in nature. So it looks very nice to see that represented in your design. It's going to look really natural and organic. And I also put just a little bit of peach in each of my groupings so that as I kind of place them around my design, I'm seeing that color a little bit everywhere, even though we only have a few of those guys. All right, so my first grouping I'm going to do up top. I mentioned earlier I have a kind of big cavity in the center up top. So I'm going to put my first grouping of roses into that area. Doesn't matter what rose you start with, but I'm going for my peach first, and I'm going to shoot to kind of have it resting right around here. So kind of in line with my hydrangea, I can line it up there, give my stem a nice cut, and then this is going to go in front of your fern, like so. So you can see I cocked it off to one side. Again, I avoided doing straight up and down the center, having it look too flagpole-y there. So my second rose, I'm going to group kind of nearby that guy. So I can line this rose up. I'm doing mine in the back, but you guys can certainly go up front. But for purposes of showing you guys everything, I'm gonna kind of go from behind so that you can see what I'm doing. So my next rose I cut, and I'm going to slide that in here. So I have a peach and then a beautiful butter yellow here. And then my last rose I'm going to do alongside those 2, so kind of filling in over here. So one thing to keep in mind as you're placing your last rose, I want to avoid having like a perfect triangle of roses in here. So any shapes that your brain can recognize, your eye is going to draw right towards that in the design. So important to kind of counter that either by playing with the shape that you're going in, so maybe a little bit more of an irregular triangle, or you can play with dimension. So I can have my last rose be a little bit deeper than my last 2, or a little bit farther out. And I'm going to choose to do mine just a little bit farther out. So like so. We'll keep it from looking a little bit too perfect. And I'm going to just adjust that really quickly. Okay. So we've got this going on. We've got our first cluster here. My second cluster, I'm going to rotate this guy and maybe do one cluster right around here. So this time I think I'll start with a yellow. And I'm going to go not quite as high, so I'm not going all the way up here like I did with my first grouping. I'm going to go a little bit farther down. So starting about halfway down my design, I'm going to place my first rose. And then my second 2 will go alongside, remembering to either play with dimension for your last one or to make sure that that shape is just not super perfect. So I did dimension again, which is a little bit more obvious. If I turn it here, you can see I left this last one out a little bit farther. So my last rose, my last cluster of roses, I'm going to place back here. Designer's choice, what color you'd like to start with. I'm going to go for the peach. And this one is going to be, again, about halfway down the design. So right about there. And then 3 and 4 are going to go below that guy. All right, so next up we are going to lay in, I think we're going to go for our stalk next. So stalk is a beautiful flower, very soft and feminine, also smells quite nice. And I love this pretty butter yellow color. So this is what we consider a line flower. So it tends to be kind of more upright. It's going to be a wonderful way to add some more balance on this side of our design by countering what's happening over here by having some pieces of this stalk kind of fanning out on this side. So I'm going to take my first piece of stalk and remove the leaves. And I want this yellow bit to kind of start where my hydrangea ends. And I'm going to kind of position it right around here. So can give this guy I'll snip, and then I'm going to slide him in kind of right up front like that. So he's definitely still coming out this way. You don't need to like have him coming out towards you. I'm going to kind of follow the lines of this vase. So I'm going to definitely have dimension coming out here, but the general shape of the arrangement itself is going to kind of follow the shape of the design, or follow the shape of the vase. Removing my leaves on my second stem, I'm going to do, I love the look of having two stalk kind of clustered near each other. So that's kind of how they would grow in nature. So it looks very nice to have two stalks. Maybe I'm going to have, my first one's going to be up here, and then the second one will be a little bit lower. So not touching each other, but having these kind of grow like this out of the design there. And then my last one, I'm going to position somewhere on this side of the arrangement. So removing the leaves here. I'm just gonna quickly. There we go. This last one, I think would be really beautiful, kind of fanning out over here, which I think I'm going to do with my last one. So I'm going to pop this last one kind of lower my piece. You can have it oriented upwards or backwards, however you want to orient the actual stem itself. Isn't very particular, but whatever you kind of feel like works with the flow of what you've created. Okay, so we've got our stalk in. Next up, I'm going to go for my Hanoi ranunculus. These guys, super, super premium. Single stem can be like $13 a piece. So quite a fancy flower as far as flowers go. We have 3 of them. There's really, really pretty blush color with this green core to it. So they're really soft and beautiful. I'm going to place them in 3 different places. My first one, I still have a hole up top. Even with all of my kind of plugging in, I still have a hole up top. So I think I'll take my biggest ranunculus and kind of position it right up top. So measure that stem. And then I'm going to slide my first Hanoi right up there. So things are filling out nicely. I think I'm going to put another one kind of over here. As I'm looking at it, it might not look this way face on, but as I'm looking at it in the video, this white area over here is kind of distracting to me. So I want to break that up a little bit by popping my next ranunculus up front to counter that a little bit. And then my last one, I'm going to get on the back of my design, maybe right around here. Make sure you get your stem in the vase, because a lot of the times when you're working with these rectangular vases, it feels like you're sliding the stem in, but you're really just kind of sliding it down the side of the vase. Okay, perfect. We are going to move next to, what do we call these guys? I don't think they're on, they're cream ranunculus. So we're calling them cream ranunculus. So these really pretty butter yellow ranunculus. Many of yours may have buds coming off. I like to break these off and then kind of put them in nearby. So placement for this guy, I think I'm going to have one kind of over here. So popping one into the front, some of this bright yellow color. And you can have you don't need to have them all kind of compressed in. Like you can have some of your ranunculus laying a little bit farther out, which is what I did. I'm going to turn my design around, and I'm going to put another one of these yellows over in this area here. We'll be patient as we're trying to slide these stems in. Okay, there we go. So I've got one in this area. My last one, I kind of want to have it be up top back here. So this last guy, and I'm just breaking off the buds, and I think I'm going to stick those in after the fact. So this last one's going to go, you can see it's back up here, kind of up top in the back, like so. And then you can revisit with these little buds, and generally I'll place my buds kind of alongside where I put one of the ranunculus, because that's tends to be how they grow in nature, and they usually reach a little farther past the last ranunculus, reaching towards the sun. So you can leave the little buds kind of spraying out a little bit farther than the full-sized ranunculus. Okay, looking really beautiful. We should have one hellebore. So hellebore, likely seeing it kind of popping up in gardens locally, is one of those flowers that thrives when it's a little bit colder. So a lot of people's ranunculus are kind of showing up right around this time. These really pretty kind of like cup-shaped blooms. Mine has one long central piece here, and then I have a smaller guy kind of popping up here. I'm going to cut this long stalk off and then use this other one somewhere else in the design. So let me take a look at my arrangement, kind of see. Okay, so I'm going to pop my first hellebore kind of up front here. So I'm going to cut my stem just a smidge, and then I'm going to place this first hellebore kind of right up front here, and you can kind of tweak how the blooms are oriented, spread them out a bit. And then my next hellebore can be a designer's choice, but I think I'm just gonna kind of pop it over on this side because I haven't put anything on this side yet. I'm gonna have it kind of peeking out over there. Looking beautiful. And then last but not least, this is one of my favorites right now. These are really, really pretty peach butterfly ranunculus. So butterfly ranunculus, they're really open, almost look like they're like taking flight, really soft and delicate, and have this beautiful bounce to them. So I'm going to begin by cutting them apart. So I have one big guy doing off here. These two I actually may leave together and have them be kind of friends. And then these two, I think I'm going to do the same, keeping these guys together. So for my first, and the beautiful thing about these, I'm going to start by just very gently removing these leaves off of them. The beautiful thing about these is the movement that they have. So that really soft, airy, delicate kind of bounce that they have. So rather than having them tucked in kind of tightly, like I have many of the other elements in this piece, I'm going to let them kind of float out so that you can really see that characteristic of them, which I think makes them super special. So one of them I'm going to kind of put up top over near where my stalk is. So being very gentle when I'm sliding these stems in, but and you can see I'm allowing them to really float, trying to resist the urge to have them be super snug and tight in there. I think I'm going to turn, let's see, my next one, I'm going to kind of have coming out of the back, and I actually think I may cut these apart because so I'm going to have some in the back. In this point, you just look for places where you feel like you have less going on, and you can just have some of these little butterfly ranunculus kind of floating out. This one little spot is very tight for me. Okay. All right, so I've got one peeking out there. And then if you do have a last little bit, which I happen to have, then you can choose wherever you want to place that guy. And for me, I'm thinking kind of right up top, have him floating over here. Okay, so the last and final thing that we have is just this little last bit of the fern. So I'm just going to kind of pinch this together, and then you can choose anywhere in your design where you might like to put it. And I'm going to pop mine in, and then I'll show you guys where I did that. So I have a ton of umbrella kind of featured in over there. So my last one I'm going to kind of have like spraying out over here. And that's it. Super, super beautiful arrangement. Definitely showcase this guy. I'll carry you through our snowstorm that's coming up in the next few days, tomorrow or tonight. Keeping it away from direct sunlight. You're gonna want to keep it away from, you don't want to push it up against a windowsill where you might get a little bit of super cold air. And then also want to keep it away from drafting heat. So wouldn't keep it near like a heat gun or anything. Other than that, you're just going to want to monitor your water line. So right now our water is really close to where the vase, the top of the vase is, but your flowers are going to start to drink and that water line is going to drift down. So either using a turkey baster or a watering can or just putting it under your kitchen sink, you can add water to the vase. And usually I'll add water to my arrangement like every 2 to 3 days and half a cup to a cup of water, depending on how warm you keep your home. But ideally you just want to make sure that the water is kind of like somewhere to an inch above the baseline is great. But yeah, we have so many fun classes coming up. Next week is going to be a fantastic class featuring David Austin garden roses. So that one's going to be really, really fun. We have wreath making classes. We have centerpiece classes for holidays like Easter. So definitely check out what we've got. We just added the majority of classes to bring us through the first half of this year. So would totally recommend signing up for that, gift it to a friend, or just continue to take classes to get you through the winter. All right, we'll see you again soon.